That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Silk Road, the latest feature directed by Tiller Russell, which Lionsgate released February 19, 2021.
This film is based on an article that was written in the New York Times.
It's ripped from the headlines of a David Kushner article.
But it was the New York Times? Or we don't know.
That sounds right, but you
Whatever.
You will need to fact check that.
It's an article written by David Kushner.
It's actually the second film based on an article by David Kushner.
What's the first one?
Zola, directed by Janixa Bravo, which premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, starring Coleman Domingo, which hasn't been released yet, actually.
Oh. Okay, this film is about a website called Silk Road, which is essentially like eBay for illicit drugs. So people can sell and purchase drugs anonymously. The site is started by a guy named Ross Ulbricht, who's played by...
Ulbricht? By Nick Robinson.
Who's the kid from Love, Simon.
Yes, among several others, including Shadow in the Cloud. He's in a bunch of stuff.
He's in Shadow in the Cloud?
Yeah, he's one of those men on that plane with Chloe Grace Moretz.
No, he is?
Yes.
Oh, I do not remember him.
He also, in Love, Simon, Alexandra Shipp, who plays his girlfriend in this film, was also part of the cast in Love, Simon.
Oh, okay. Anyway, he's a college student who decides to create this site. It is a huge hit immediately. As we would predict, his site is taken down. So the FBI finally gets him, and he ends up getting 2 life sentences.
Plus.
That's the basic story. Now, the other main character is Rick Bowden, who's played by
Jason Clarke.
He's a DEA agent who's like 9 months away from retiring, and we see that he has had issues with like drug addiction or alcohol addiction and
excessive force.
So he's had some issues. So he's been transferred to like the cyber crimes unit. He barely knows how to turn on a computer. So the purpose of transferring him to the cyber crimes unit was to keep him quiet until he can be booted out with retirement. However, he becomes privy to sort of like low-level drug trafficking related to Silk Road, and he decides that he wants to crack this case the old school way.
Which is a human target, and he is able to actually wheedle his way in and discover who Ross is before the cybercrimes unit.
Yes. So, I don't even know where to begin. I did not care for this movie at all.
Neither did I. But it starts out in 2013, and we get that long shot of Nick Robinson in San Francisco right before he's apprehended, because he was convicted in 2015. And then we back up 3 years to between Baltimore and Austin, where we get simultaneous storylines pertinent to Jason Clarke and Nick Robinson.
I'm just going to go down my notes. So we don't get a lot of background as to why this character Ross wants to do this, except some talk about like liberty, and I'm very disconnected between like this character and why he chose to do this thing, because he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who wants to be in trouble.
No, he keeps repeating a mantra about how it's kind of intended as an instrument of liberty. I think that is the verbiage that he's using for what Silk Road is supposed to be. And we meet him having what I thought was a very basic conversation with his friends, played by Daniel David Stewart, in a bar where he meets Alexandra Shipp, talking about Lawrence v. Texas, and there's some other major court case. Loving v. Virginia, to get her attention, which I don't know. And I think one of the problems with this film is the script rife with cliches. And it was written by Tiller Russell, who you might also be familiar with because he recently directed the Night Stalker limited series on Netflix.
Which we'll get into at the end, I guess. But so my first note is when Ross decides he's going to create this website for the anonymous trafficking of drugs, he's like viewing like a YouTube tutorial on like the dark web, which I thought was so corny. Also, when he's explaining like Bitcoin, it all just seems very like dark web hackers 101 for like the audience.
Yeah, sure.
It was so basic. Sure. And I felt it was just tedious listening to him. Like the first few moments of them, because it's kind of a montage of how they set up the site. And then immediately it's a hit because the girlfriend, whatever her name is,
Julia,
she knows someone at Gawker. And they're trying to figure, because when they first opened Silk Road, they have sales, but they're minimal. And they make fun of Ross because he's posting about it anonymously in like chat rooms, trying to drum up business. And then his little gay friend, the redhead, is like, you need a bigger platform. So then old girl says, how about Gawker? Well, they're never going to listen to you. Well, just call him. So they call him, and that's like a stupid scene. And the guy, the Gawker reporter, prints the story, and sales go through the roof.
Oh, that's such a terribly constructed scene because it's trying to also show jealousy between Julia and Ross. Because she's like, I know a writer at Gawker. Don't even ask how, and he gets all like huffy about it.
So another plot point as to how, so they say like right away, like immediately when the Gawker article is printed or released, that sales have gone through the roof and Ross has thousands of messages in his inbox. Okay, but the DEA agent, Rick Bowden, the way he sort of catches Ross is he starts communicating with him in like the Silk Road chat room. Like he's communicating with the senior admin and sort of develops like a pen pal relationship, which I thought was so unbelievable. Like this man who's the only person running this website, who's getting thousands and thousands of messages a day, somehow we see him corresponding with this one person. And like investing a lot of time in it whenever we see Ross working and not talking to him, he seems overwhelmed with what's going on.
Yes.
So how does he have time to chat with this man so much and build a trust with him?
I agree. We get flashes of their chat checks on the screen to show that somehow he's able to build trust with him because Ross says something to the effect of like, it's hard to know who to trust. Somehow he first reaches out wanting to buy his site.
Right.
And concurrently, how it all works out is Ross has also headhunted like the most highly rated seller on the site.
So that was my next note, because my first thought was like, how are they going to guarantee quality on this site where everything's anonymous? Well, they do it by sort of like the buyers and sellers get reviewed. So people who are the most highly reviewed obviously would be the ones who would be sold and purchased from the most. So there's one character, the chubby guy.
Curtis Clarke Green, played by Paul Walter Hauser.
He's like a top seller who's most highly reviewed. So Ross reaches out to him saying like, do you want to work for me? I'll make you rich or something. And then he's like, send me a scan of your driver's license. And the guy just does it.
Yeah.
Which was so unbelievable to me. You're on the dark web selling illegal, like heroin, mushrooms, crack, whatever. And you just like scan your ID and send it. But he starts working for him. Rick Bowden, he ends up finding out that a lot of the drugs are being shipped from Utah, and he narrows it down to Chubby Man. And like they raid his place. And then this is where the story takes a turn, because Rick chooses to go rogue and basically like blackmail Ross and his one employee to get money out of them. Because side plot, Rick is like, he has a relationship with his wife and they have a kid.
Played by Katie Aselton.
And for some reason we care about that, and she seems to live a lavish lifestyle and wants to send this small child to like a school that costs like $40,000 a year.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And he needs the money. So he ultimately uses the money he blackmails from Silk Road to pay for his kid's education, presumably. Because we just see him leave cash at the front door. Because now Rick is in prison for like 6 years for mismanagement of this case that he was not supposed to even be working on. I was so annoyed by that.
Oh, you were also quite annoyed by Darrell Britt-Gibson playing Rayford.
Who's that? Oh, okay. I was also very bothered by that because they have this generic sort of like informant bad guy who's played by this black man who could have been 20 or 60. His behavior is that of like a 20-something, but I think he looks elderly. And then they give him this like afro. I just think that character was styled so poorly.
He was a ganglion of cliches, yes.
I was just so bothered by that. And then he lives in this really cool loft with all these sneakers everywhere and is very tech savvy. Appears to be a pretty intelligent guy, but then he's presented like this petty criminal who's just always on the streets.
His introductory scene is also awkward because he confronts Bowden in a liquor store and calls him out for having been in a psych ward.
I was so annoyed because every scene that the black guy and the Rick are in, what's the black man's name, the character? Rayford. Every scene Rayford and Rick are in, Rayford's like, stop calling me. Leave me alone. Stop calling me. It just was so one note on top of the cliched.
It felt like they were trying to hide the cliches with vague banalities. Like he chastises Jason Clarke once for eating a bear claw, which I thought just plays so awkwardly. But notably Darrell Britt-Gibson, who's been in a bunch of stuff recently, played Bobby Rush in Judas and the Black Messiah.
Okay. He's fine, I'm sure, as an actor. I also wrote down that character could have been played by J.B. Smoove. Because that's how awkward Rayford was played.
Sure, but I think that what the problem is the script and the directing, because I think Jason Clarke is a very good actor, and I think he does fine in it. It's just like the problem with, as a Night Stalker, the focus is this cop, when he's the least interesting part of the story.
Also, the characterization of Rick Bowden is like old school, like crack the pavement or hit the pavement, pound the pavement, whatever. It felt very like those 80s, like Die Hard type.
Charles Bronson.
Something like that. And it just did not work. Because then to put him, this same character in the cybercrimes unit who barely can turn on a computer, every interaction where he's having tech issues was so annoying. Then the person playing Rick's boss is supposed to be this 26-year-old kid who has a mustache that looks like it's been drawn on. That character was written so poorly. He's just so flippant. And then there's a scene where he actually explains to him like, hey, the only reason you're here is we want you to wait it out till you retire. So just sit here and do nothing. And then this kid is like squeaking all of his lines. That was so annoying. Then there's a scene where he tells him, every time you have a tech issue, don't call me. Why didn't you just tell him to call IT then?
Right.
Why are you even entertaining this man?
I also had a problem with Nick Robinson as Ross, who to me was a very stiff performance.
Yes. I feel like his performance in this movie is kind of how I feel about Kristen Stewart in the Twilight films.
Sure.
Like, I like Kristen Stewart now.
Same.
But back then, she was so flat.
He seems wholly disinterested in this characterization. And the script tries to, give some background on him as a child in that scene where he brings Alexandra Shipp to dinner and how he had been obsessed with the Guinness World Book of Records. And he seems to be painted in these millennial cliches of never being able to follow through with something.
Yeah, and then at one point he says, I'm creating a journal because there may be a story written about me. And it's like, so he seems self-aware, but we don't get any development about this character. Also, there's a point where he and his girlfriend get into a fight because she shows him an article where some kid ODs on crack or something that was purchased from Silk Road.
Yes.
And she's like, there seems to be this moral dilemma that his site is selling crack, but everything else is fine.
And I think guns eventually show up on there as well.
And then he says he's just trying to expand people's access to controlled substances, which I thought was such a stupid line, or for him to even say or think. There's a reason these substances are controlled.
Correct.
Not everyone should have access to them. They may not know how to dose them or whatever. Interactions. So again, I just don't understand this character's motivation for why he thought creating Silk Road was going to help mankind. Because he doesn't seem like he wants to be a drug lord. He also doesn't seem like he cares about money. So what is his motivation for doing this? Oh my God, the man who... So the FBI is who eventually catches Ross and shuts down Silk Road. And the main FBI agent is played by that guy from House of Cards.
Jimmy Simpson.
Who
was just in Breaking News in Yuba County.
I didn't mind him in Yuba County, but the first time we see Mr. Simpson, he's talking to all these FBI agents, and Rick Bowden shows up to be informed. And he tells a story about his brother-in-law getting struck by lightning
twice.
And how nothing's impossible. Getting struck by lightning twice and how nothing's impossible. That shit was so corny. It was painful to sit through.
It wasn't good. And I kept laughing. His character's last name is Tarbell. Ask Tarbell.
I don't know what else to say about this movie.
It has a lot of the same faults of other films that are trying to reconstruct something based on a true story. It reminded me a little bit of, there's a Bryan Cranston film from 2016 called The Infiltrator, directed by Brad Furman, or I believe he's a customs agent that has dealings with Escobar. It felt very much like that. I was also reminded of My Spy a little bit, as far as the Jason Clarke, Rick Bowden, like he had this major fuck up, so now we're going to put him on this shit detail. And then he causes all this trouble while he's doing it. Or there's this Kurt Russell movie, Cryptocurrency, that was also not good, trying to deal with the dangers of digital currency, if you will. It was lensed by Peter Flinckenberg, which I think is interesting because he's a Finnish cinematographer who's really done some excellent work. I don't know that it's really evident here, but he lends the last Pirjo Hongsalo film from 2013, Concrete Night, who's a very notable Finnish art house filmmaker. So it's just interesting, all of those elements together and how none of it really works.
No. The final sort of montage, we see Ross and Rick end up in the same prison. Which is just like, this movie is trying so hard. I don't know what it's trying to do, but it's doing a poor job of it, and really it just felt so corny.
The voiceover narration, just none of it really worked for me. I thought I had another point in there, but...
what would you give this movie?
I think 1 out of 5.
I would give it 1 out of 5 as well. Thank you.
Bye.